Life in the UK Test. Chapter 3, Section 6, Part 2. Disclaimer. This work is independent and non-official. It is a free help based on life in the United Kingdom, a guide for new residents, 3rd edition handbook. December 2015. Chapter 3. Section 6. Part 2. Britain since 1945. Migration in post-war Britain. Social change in the 1960s. Problem in the economy in the 1970s. Mary Peters 1939. Europe and the Common Market, Migration in post-war Britain. Rebuilding Britain after the Second World War was a huge task. There were labour shortages and the British government encouraged workers from Ireland and other parts of Europe to come to the UK and help with the reconstruction. In 1948, people from the West Indies were also invited to come and work. During the 1950s, there was still a shortage of labour in the UK. Further immigration was therefore encouraged for economic reasons, and many industries advertised for workers from overseas. For example, centres were set up in the West Indies to recruit people to drive buses. Textile and engineering firms from the north of England and the Midlands sent agents to India and Pakistan to find workers. For about 25 years, people from the West Indies, India, Pakistan and, later, Bangladesh travelled to work and settle in Britain. Social change in the 1960s. The decade of the 1960s was a period of significant social change. It was known as the Swinging 60s. There was growth in British fashion, cinema and popular music. Two well-known pop music groups at the time were the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. People started to become better off and many bought cars and other consumer goods. It was also a time when social laws were liberalised, for example in relation to divorce and to abortion in England, Wales, and Scotland. The position of women in the workplace also improved. It was quite common at the time for employers to ask women to leave their jobs when they got married, but Parliament passed new laws giving women the right to equal pay and made it illegal for employers to discriminate against women because of their gender. The 1960s was also a time of technological progress. Britain and France developed the world's only supersonic commercial airliner, Concorde. New styles of architecture, including high-rise buildings and the use of concrete and steel, became common. The number of people migrating from the West Indies, India, Pakistan and what is now Bangladesh fell in the late 1960s because the government passed new laws to restrict immigration to Britain. Immigrants were required to have a strong connection to Britain through birth or ancestry. Even so, during the early 1970s, Britain admitted 28,000 people of Indian origin who had been forced to leave Uganda. Problem in the economy in the 1970s. In the late 1970s, the post-war economic boom came to an end. Prices of goods and raw materials began to rise sharply and the exchange rate between the pound and other currencies was unstable. This caused problems with the balance of payments. Imports of goods were valued at more than the price paid for exports. Many industries and services were affected by strikes and this caused problems between the trade unions and the government. People began to argue that the unions were too powerful and that their activities were harming the UK. The 1970s were also a time of serious unrest in Northern Ireland. In 1972, the Northern Ireland Parliament was suspended and Northern Ireland was directly ruled by the UK government. Some 3,000 people lost their lives in the decades after 1969 in the violence of Northern Ireland. Mary Peters 1939. Born in Manchester, Mary Peters moved to Northern Ireland as a child. She was a talented athlete who won an Olympic gold medal in the pentathlon, in 1972. After this, she raised money for local athletics and became the team manager for the women's British Olympic team. She continues to promote sport and tourism in Northern Ireland and was made a Dame of the British Empire in 2000, in recognition of her work, Europe and the Common Market. West Germany, France, Belgium, Italy, Luxembourg and the Netherlands formed the European Economic Community, in 1957. At first the UK did not wish to join the EC, but it eventually did so in 1973. The UK is a full member of the European Union but does not use the euro currency. Study materials. All chapters from the study materials are Crown copyright and have been based on Life in the United Kingdom, a guide for new residents 3rd edition handbook. All photos are borrowed from wikipedia.org under the Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 3.0 unported. This work is independent and non-official, prepared in December 2015.